All right, so we will we will do a live review of this here guy here, the Elijah Craig small batch, the typical um, run of the mill Elijah Craig, I suppose, the general standard bottle. This is a Heaven Hill product. It is Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. In case you couldn't see that part, it is Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. It is 47% ABV, 94 proof. It is chill filtered. We don't have to talk about coloration. The mash bill is 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley, and is aged 8 to 12 years in New Chardock barrels. So there's no age statement. Um, Now, the word straight means if it's over 4 years old, they don't have to put an age statement, but it's at least 4 years old by that measure. But the understanding is it is 8 to 12 years New Charred Oak, and it has a batch size of 200 barrels. So this is a small batch of 200 barrels, um, but that is still a small batch compared to some other things. So um, 200 barrel batch size. Obviously, that's 10 times as large as Michter's 20 barrel batch size, or Rabbit Hole's 15 barrel batch size. But it's still like small compared to some other batch sizes. Um, so this is just going to be probably straight down home plate bourbony. It's not terribly expensive, but it's also not at the bottom shelf. So um, it's about good. And we'll give that a minute to kind of like rest its alcohols there. Um, so for some reason, in my brain, Heaven Hill was the largest holder of aging bourbon whiskey, but this note says it's the second largest holder. Um, then what's the largest holder of aging bourbon? Oh, it's different now. Okay, so um, in 2018 they were the second largest holder, but now they are the largest holder. Who was in first? Uh, I don't know. uh, doesn't really want to. If I search about distilleries that are aging bourbon, Heaven Hill comes up a whole bunch, but no nothing else. They don't really talk about any other distillery. Although this does say that as of August of last year, um, they have 2 million barrels right now. 2 million barrels aging. But there's no like list. unless it's like Jack Daniels. Maybe Jack Daniels has more. I don't know. I can't find it exactly, but they have lots of aging bourbon. It's either first or second. um, but apparently they have 2 million barrels right now. They're aging 2 million barrels, which is quite a bit. That's a couple of barrels. Um, of course, this is, again, Elijah Craig is not the only thing um, that comes out of Heaven Hill. There's all kinds of different brands that come out of Heaven Hill, but um, probably the other one that's like right up in front is Evan Williams. All right, so this is obviously a natural new charred oak color. Um, it's actually a deeper color than the last bourbon we looked at, which I can't remember which one that was, but this one looks pretty deep in coloration. Um, glass coat is okay. And yeah, like immediately, like it kind of seems a little spicy still. It's not like going up into a dill, at least not right away. I feel like it kind of like went up all into a dill the last time we were nosing it, but some of that corn distillate is present here. There's some oak and spiciness. We're obviously going to get some sweetness here in a minute, but for me, like the sweetness is not always up front. It usually takes a while to present itself, as we say so often. But yeah, there's like a spiciness, a buttery corn note, some oakiness in there. I'd say like the buttery corn character is like predominant. And then the rye note is kind of like rye bread, a little bit spicy, but not super crazy, and just like a soft oaky character. All right, on the palate. Cheers. A little hot today for some reason, but it's a first sip, so coming across like a little hot today for some reason. It's only this is only 94, right? Yeah, 94 proof. Some brown sugar coming in. It's like brown sugar on rye bread. A little bit of that like corn note and some oakiness. Yeah, a little bit sweet, a little bit of corn character, a little bit of spiciness. Spiciness kind of like pops at the start of the finish. There's like a soft sweetness throughout it, but it's spicy, soft sweetness throughout it. Um, Oak plays in there. Finish is not super long. Right now it feels like medium minus. More sweet and spicy on the palate now, or on the nose now. The palate is like not, it's not expressing as much as I would like. Kind of feels like the palate is the weakest part right now. The finish has a good number of flavors that are all pretty present. There's definitely a spike in the spiciness, and it kind of feels predominant. But you get a sweetness in there, you get some oak in there, you get some corn, buttery character in there, and there's definitely some of that oak sweetness and corn on the palate too. But it's not as concentrated of a flavor as I would like. All the like sweet rye bread right now. But yeah, like it comes across a little bit. It comes across a little bit more like rye content than I would think. And maybe it's just the barrel playing games or something, but I almost want to say like there's a bit of a red licorice note to it, which I would think is more like a higher rye thing. But to me, the sweetness is mostly brown sugar, but it feels like there's a red licorice note in here too, like a red rope licorice or nibs. Yeah, it's like the palate. I could use some more. I could use some more on the palate. It's like not as punchy as I would like. Although the sweetness is like a little bit more thick on the palate and finish, a little bit more syrupy. Um, but I feel like I'm trying to find flavor on the palate. Like it's not that there's no flavor, but it's not like it's not presenting as well as I would like. Like there's a good amount of impact on the finish. It's like as soon as I swallow, I kind of get more out of it. There's like a little bit uh, of of a corn note, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of oak on the palate, but it's a little tame. The palate's a little tame. But then as soon as it goes over, it's like, okay, there's the spice, there's some sweetness, a little bit oaky there. Finish is not terribly super long. We'll call finish like medium minus. I think that's fair. Um, it's doing all the bourbon things. I just could use a little bit more of those bourbon things on the palate. Nose is kind of interesting with the like seemingly increased rye impact. We're gonna take one more sip and then we're gonna put some numbers down. Pretty much just sweet and oaky at this point. A little bit red licorice, a little bit rye bread. Yeah, my opinion on it right away is like the nose and the finish are like pretty equal players, and the palate just needs a little bit of something. Um, so at 25, I'm gonna focus on the aroma. It's probably not more than good. There's been definitely been a development between like the first setup of notes from the pour to like a second set of notes to like now it's kind of a third set of notes that's not terribly complex, but we got to take into consideration that it had a large amount of transition between when it was poured and this point. But right now, it's mostly coming across like just a little bit syrupy sweet, maybe red rope licorice, minor rye bread, maybe really faint dill note. Maybe really faint dusty corn. I'll call 14. 14 out of 25. All right. We'll try to focus on the palate. Kind of immediately on the arrival, there's some spiciness, and then it's kind of joined by like a subtle syrup sweetness and a subtle oak character, but there's not much else there. Um, Probably call it 13. It's at least got more than one thing going on. All right. And once more on the finish. That being said, texture seems pretty good. Um, yeah, on the finish, oak and spice, spike, little layer of syrupy sweetness. Some of that kind of like rye character is present. A little bit of that corn character is present. And then the like very subtle sweetness, oak, spice kind of ride out. Call the finish 15. It's not terribly long either. Um, it's not bad, but it's not terribly long. It's not short. Now, out of 10, we're going to focus on the texture. And to me, I think this is like a 6, but I don't have a lot left here. But I guess this is why we pour 50 milliliters. Because sometimes you need 50 milliliters. The palette was giving me some trouble on this one. I was hunting a little bit. Yeah, texture is reasonable. I'll call it a 6. 6 out of 10. Then we're going to talk about out of 15 my experience with this particular whiskey. It's good. It's good. It's bourbon. It's bourbon. There's nothing particularly crazy going on here. It's a good value, but we don't rate based on price. We kind of just rate based on our own perception of it and let the value metric, if you will, worry about the price. That being said, there's nothing this is particularly doing that necessarily makes it stand out against other bourbons. It's kind of a run-of-the-mill bourbon, if you will. It's doing the bourbon things. It tastes like bourbon. It smells like bourbon. It's bourbon. It's not doing anything wild and crazy. I'm not sure that I would particularly want this over other bourbons for any particular reason. The value of it is probably in the like what you get for the price. It's probably something in there. If you can get a pretty good bourbon for a pretty good price, that's kind of like maybe where you're going with this kind of play. But I'm not like necessarily reaching for this one in particular over some other bourbon, for example. So while it's good and it's tasty and I like it, nothing wrong with it. It's just bourbon. It's doing bourbon things. So I'll call this a 3 out of 15, which is a forgettable experience because I could forget it for sure. And in a sea of bourbons, it's not doing anything to set itself apart of other bourbons. All right. So 14 and 13, 15 and 6 and 3 is 51. That's still 51. Despite what I said about the experience, that's still 51. Which makes it good. This is a good whiskey.